Hello and welcome to the Comm 247 Understanding New Net Things podcast. I am your host, David Saunders, and we are bringing the latest topic of net neutrality to the table for discussion. The world spends lots of time knowing what is new, colorful, and overall eccentric in terms of the internet, but we rarely understand what occurs behind the scenes, nor do we understand how or why it affects us, the public, the way it does. I am here to break down net neutrality with the help of a couple of friends of mine from local readings that we've had in our classroom, in the hopes of educating and possibly helping you find your stance on the matter. So first off, we need to understand what net neutrality is via the definition. It is not as simple as saying you are Switzerland in World War II, but it's also not as complex as defusing a bomb with 5 seconds on the timer. Sorry, jokes. Net neutrality is, by definition, the principle that internet service providers should enable access to all content and applications regardless of the source, without favoring or blocking particular products or websites. I think Google, for that definition, without net neutrality, I would have to pay $5 just to even look that up. You'll understand why here soon, but that joke is actually rather immersive into today's topic. The act of having net neutrality forces or controls ISPs, or internet service providers, as mentioned before, such as Spectrum or Comcast or whatever you have in your local area, from charging the average American subtle payments every time they wish to use the internet. So anytime you wanted to get on Netflix, for instance, watch a YouTube video, do some work from home even, the internet service providers that you control, the companies that are going through them that you were trying to access, would charge you every time you try to use them because they can. The reason behind this is due to what we call in the internet world throttling. And what that means is, well, I actually let the Daily Show's Jon Stewart mention via Becky Lynn from one of the previous readings I mentioned, take it over from here.
Do you like cats?
Yes.
Like cats? Do you like cats dressed up like movie stars of the 40s and 50s? If you do like that, then you probably like the internet. As telecommunications expert Ted Stevens once explained, the internet is a series of tubes. Now, currently, everything moves through those tubes at pretty much the same rate. Like if you've got a packet of information from a major corporation like Google, that information gets exactly the same treatment as, say, a packet from a little startup company like Jon Stewart's head on Mario Lopez's body getting by unicorn.net. .net. I was going to have that .com, but it was already taken, so I got .net.
John, you are a funny guy. If you didn't hear at the beginning there, cats are kind of a big thing on the internet. So with that cat out of the bag, we kind of move into our knowledge of why net neutrality is the way it is. So John mentioned something about tubes, so to speak, and everything on the internet moves through these tubes at a certain rate, and that rate is controlled by your ISPs. Well, currently, net neutrality rules enacted mean that the ISPs can only do it so much for each kind of company and each person. So everybody's kind of on an equal playing field right now. With net neutrality rules being repealed, as they are now currently being enacted that way, it would mean that we would have to start paying for... With net neutrality rules being repealed, this opens up the market to a lot of unforeseen change that will be difficult to manage if we are not careful. Repealing the Net Neutrality Act will allow large companies to be susceptible to ISPs charging them for their service. The ISPs charging them for their service will then make them charge us for their services a little bit more because of how it's happening. Those tubes that John mentioned before will begin to expand dramatically depending on how much the ISP is daring to charge the users for their service. A company such as Google will be charged kind of greatly because it's a large company, but a company such as the one that John mentioned before about a unicorn and a bud or something like that will not be charged as much, but it still will be charged in amount depending on how large it is. Now, common news companies online will have to pay more to push their services through to your computers at home, through your computer devices, so to speak. Them having to pay more will happen to have an effect on how much we have to pay to get that news service. So let's say you want to go on Facebook and look up something about donkeys. Well, a donkey website will have to now pay a little bit more to send that information to your computer back at home, and in doing so, you will have to pay that company, or essentially your ISP through the tubes that we've talked about, a little bit more extra just to even see the same data because you want to see that specific thing. Now, with all of this, we see now why net neutrality affects us so heavily, and the consequences of it being disabled are so heavy on that aspect as well. But what is the good side to it? Well, it creates a lot of competition. In the ISP world, it really determines how much you are willing to charge companies, because the companies will always go with whoever's charging them less for their services. In terms of like Google or Facebook, something like that, they may not mind as much, but they're still a company. They're still out there to make money, and the less they have to pay, the better your chances are of not having to pay them for the service you're getting. So let's take it back a second. What are the political aspects that would be good for this? Tarleton Gillespie, he's another reader, or how would I say, another subject that we hit upon is the political aspects. Let's say there's the campaign running for presidency, and you are the Republican side. I think you're going to want to see Republican side information versus the Democratic side. Now, Republican information services will be able to come to your window through better providers, because you'll be paying those providers instead of an overall general fee to see all the information in general. So there is some upside depending on how you think about it in terms of competition and the good of the faith in the human heart, but that is up to you to determine. The ISPs really do control everything that we have going on here, and if we really want this to go away, that's on the community and the public. We can fight back against it, or we can kind of sentence it to its doom in terms of the Net Neutrality Act being repealed. This is David Saunders, and I have been your host for today's podcast. I really hope you appreciated it and what we've learned today. Net neutrality is a complex ideal, and we don't really understand it sometimes, so that's why I hope to give you a little bit more information today in the hopes that you could come to your own conclusions. I appreciate it, and all of you have a great day.